For most people, collapse feels random. They're told it's a shock, a surprise, something no one could have seen coming. But history shows something far more uncomfortable. Every major collapse follows a script, and the same group always pays first, the middle class, not because they caused the collapse, but because they are positioned perfectly to absorb it. This pattern is not modern, it is ancient. Let's start with Rome. By the 3rd century AD, the Roman Empire was already financially broken. Military spending was enormous, tax revenues were shrinking, the currency had been debased repeatedly. By the reign of Emperor Caracalla, the silver denarius had already lost much of its purity. By 260 AD, it contained less than 5% silver. Prices rose, confidence fell. But Rome did not confiscate wealth from senators, and it could not extract more from the poor without revolt. So it turned to the middle. Farmers were legally bound to their land. Tradesmen were bound to their professions. Tax obligations became hereditary. This wasn't chaos, it was policy. By the time Emperor Diocletian issued the edict on maximum prices in 301 AD, Rome was trying to control inflation by law. The penalty for violating price controls was death. Commerce collapsed anyway. The Roman middle class disappeared, absorbed into dependency. Rome did not fall because of barbarians. The barbarians arrived after the economic core had been hollowed out. Now move forward. France, late 18th century. By 1788, the French state was bankrupt. Decades of war and royal excess had emptied the treasury. The nobility paid almost no taxes. The clergy paid almost nothing. So the burden fell on the bourgeoisie, merchants, professionals, small landowners. They funded the state, they funded the wars, they funded the monarchy. Bread prices surged, wages stagnated, savings vanished. The French Revolution did not begin with the poorest citizens. It began when this middle class was financially crushed and politically excluded. Collapse didn't arrive suddenly. It arrived after years of quiet extraction. Now Germany. After World War I, Germany was burdened with massive reparations. To meet its obligations, the government printed money. At first, nothing dramatic happened. Employment continued. People worked. The system functioned. But inflation does not strike evenly. The wealthy owned land, factories, foreign assets. The poor lived day to day. The middle class held cash savings. By 1923, hyperinflation destroyed them. Teachers, engineers, civil servants, people who had saved for decades found their life's work could no longer buy food. The system survived. The middle class didn't. Now look at the United States. In 1971, President Richard Nixon ended the dollar's convertibility to gold. This wasn't framed as collapse. It was framed as modernization. What followed wasn't immediate disaster. It was slow erosion. Real wages peaked in 1973. From that point forward, productivity rose, but wages did not. Asset prices inflated, debt expanded. The middle class did not lose everything overnight. They lost purchasing power slowly. Savings weakened. Housing became debt dependent. Education and healthcare costs surged. The poor received assistance. The wealthy owned assets that inflated. The middle absorbed the difference. Then came 2008. Banks took reckless risks. The system nearly failed. When collapse becomes unavoidable, governments face 3 choices: open default, elite losses, or silent transfer. Open default causes panic. Elite losses threaten power. So losses are transferred quietly through inflation, taxes, frozen wages, and rising costs. The middle class is large enough to matter and compliant enough to endure. That's why it always pays, not because it is weak, but because it is useful. It believes in stability. It trusts institutions. It waits for recovery. And that patience is exactly what allows the system to survive. At its expense. Every collapse looks different, but the outcome is always the same. The middle class funds the reset. What changed over time wasn't who pays for collapse. It was how quietly it happens. In the past, collapse was visible. Currencies failed openly, governments defaulted, people panicked. Modern systems learned that panic is dangerous. So instead of allowing collapse to arrive all at once, they learned how to stretch it out, slow it down, and redirect the cost without triggering a revolt. The middle class became the perfect buffer. The first mechanism is inflation. Inflation does not look like confiscation. There are no soldiers, no announcements. Prices simply rise. In the United States, during the 1970s, inflation averaged more than 7% for nearly a decade. In 1980, it peaked above 13%. Wages rose, but not fast enough. Middle-class households watched groceries, housing, fuel, and education costs rise faster than their income. Savings lost value every year. No one was told they were paying for anything, but they were. Britain followed the same path after World War II. The government emerged from the war with enormous debt. Instead of defaulting, it inflated. From 1945 through the 1970s, inflation steadily eroded middle-class savings while wage controls limited income growth. The pound lost most of its purchasing power. The empire did not collapse dramatically. It faded. And the middle class paid for the transition. Now look at Japan. After its asset bubble burst in 1991, Japan faced a collapse that should have reset the system. It didn't. Interest rates were pushed to zero, debt exploded, markets were stabilized. For over 30 years, Japan avoided visible crisis, and for over 30 years, the middle class stagnated. Wages barely moved, savings earned nothing. Younger generations lost upward mobility. The system survived. Participation stopped being rewarding. That's what engineered stability looks like. The second mechanism is debt. Debt allows governments to delay consequences. Instead of raising taxes sharply, states borrow. But debt must be resolved eventually. Historically, debt ends in three ways: default, restructuring, or inflation. Default causes panic. Restructuring angers creditors. Inflation spreads the pain quietly. And inflation always targets the middle class first. Argentina is a textbook example. In the 1990s, Argentina pegged its currency to the US dollar to project stability. Inflation dropped. Confidence returned. The middle class began saving again. But debt kept rising. When the system broke in 2001, the government froze bank accounts overnight. People were locked out of their own savings. The wealthy had already moved money abroad. The poor had little to lose. The middle class lost everything. Argentina didn't collapse suddenly. It delayed reality until the cost became catastrophic. Housing is another mechanism. After 2008, interest rates across the developed world were pushed near zero. This was framed as recovery. But cheap credit doesn't benefit everyone equally. Asset prices surged. Homes doubled and tripled in price. The wealthy bought assets. The middle class took on debt. In Spain, the housing bubble burst after 2008. Banks were rescued. Markets stabilized. But an entire generation of middle-class Spaniards lost equity, careers, and mobility. The system survived. People paid. Pensions are another quiet extraction tool. Pensions promise stability in an unstable world, but they depend on growth. When growth stalls, benefits are reduced quietly. Retirement ages rise, payments are adjusted. Inflation does the rest. This happened in Greece after 2010. Government debt exploded. Austerity followed. Pensions were cut. Taxes rose. The wealthy protected assets. The poor relied on assistance. The middle class collapsed. Greece did not default completely. It was stabilized, at the expense of its productive core. This is the modern pattern. Avoid visible collapse. Preserve confidence. Transfer the cost slowly. The middle class absorbs the shock because it is invested in stability. It believes the system will correct itself. It waits, and waiting is expensive. By the time the damage becomes obvious, the transfer is already complete. Savings are weaker. Debt is permanent. Upward mobility is gone. Collapse no longer feels like disaster. It feels like exhaustion. People work harder and fall behind anyway. That feeling is not psychological. It is structural. It is the signal that the middle class is already paying again. And once this phase is complete, the final stage begins. Who survives? Who escapes? Who moves early? By the time collapse becomes obvious, the most important decisions have already been made. History shows this without exception. The people who come out stronger after collapses are not the smartest. They are not the hardest working. They are not even the richest at the beginning. They are the ones who move early. Because when systems finally break in public, movement is no longer allowed. Let's return to Rome one last time. When the Western Roman Empire formally collapsed in 476 AD, senators did not starve. They did not wander. They did not beg. They had already converted political power into land ownership. When currency failed, they owned food. When trade collapsed, they controlled production. When central authority disappeared, they became local authority. The middle class did not have that option. Merchants, administrators, and professionals depended on centralized stability. When that stability vanished, their skills lost value overnight. Rome didn't destroy everyone equally. It preserved those who detached from the system early. Now look at Constantinople, 1453. As the Ottoman Empire closed in, wealthy merchant families did not wait for the walls to fall. They moved capital and trade networks to Venice and Genoa years earlier. By the time the city fell, survival had already been decided. Those who trusted the system's permanence lost everything. Those who exited early preserved wealth and influence. Fast forward to Russia, 1917. Before the Bolshevik Revolution, wealthy families saw instability long before it reached the streets. Gold, art, and capital were moved abroad. When the revolution came, borders closed, property was seized, savings were erased, mobility disappeared. The middle class, shop owners, professionals, civil servants, was trapped. Those who waited for clarity got none. Those who moved early didn't need it. Now Germany again. During the hyperinflation of 1923, people who survived best were not those with money. They were those with assets and flexibility. Farmers traded food. Craftsmen bartered skills. Middle-class professionals with savings were wiped out. Then came 1948, when the Deutschmark replaced the Reichsmark. Savings were reset. Those who had converted into goods, tools, or property recovered quickly. Those who trusted paper wealth were erased twice in one generation. The same pattern appears in the Soviet Union. In the late 1980s, the system looked stable on paper. Jobs existed, prices were controlled, the state promised security. But insiders knew the truth. They built foreign connections. They accumulated real assets. They prepared exits. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, currency became worthless almost overnight. Pensions disappeared. Savings vanished. The middle class, engineers, teachers, administrators, fell into poverty. The people who moved early became oligarchs. The people who waited became irrelevant. Now look at modern examples. Argentina, 2001. Those who converted savings into foreign currency before the freeze survived. Those who trusted banks were locked out. Greece, 2010. Those who diversified assets early escaped. Those who believed pensions were guaranteed lost everything. Lebanon, 2019. Capital controls arrived overnight. The middle class was wiped out in months. This isn't about intelligence. It's about timing. Collapse doesn't punish ignorance. It punishes loyalty to systems that can no longer protect you. The middle class always pays because it believes the system will correct itself. That belief is exactly what makes it expendable. Systems protect themselves first. Institutions protect legitimacy second. People come last. And the middle class, productive, compliant, hopeful, becomes the shock absorber. Once the shock absorber is exhausted, the system restructures. Not fairly, efficiently. That's why the final stage before collapse always feels strange. Markets may still function. Governments may still sound confident. Life may still look normal. But trust drains quietly. People stop believing effort guarantees outcomes. They stop believing savings equal security. They stop believing tomorrow will reward today. That isn't cultural pessimism. It is a structural signal. History shows that belief collapses before systems do. And when belief goes, everything accelerates. This is why the most dangerous phrase before every collapse is, things are stable again. Stability does not mean health. Stability often means suppression. And suppression always creates pressure. The middle class always pays because it sits exactly where that pressure is released. This is not fear. This is pattern recognition. Understanding it doesn't mean panic. It means clarity. It means recognizing that systems don't promise continuity, only participation. And participation comes with hidden costs when rules change silently. If you've watched this far, you already understand something most people never will. You're not here for comfort. You're here for awareness. And awareness is the only advantage history consistently rewards. If you want to keep understanding how collapses actually unfold, not how they re-explained after the fact, subscribe. Not because this channel predicts dates or disasters, but because it teaches you how to recognize when the story you being told no longer matches the structure underneath. History doesn't warn loudly, it whispers first, and the people who listen early never have to scramble when everyone else finally hears the noise.